We've been living in sin so long, all the feels are gone. Fella stopped me on the street last night, said everything's alright. Roller coaster, make it through the day, I'm right. It seems your meal ticket is gone, but life goes on. I could never imagine something better. Yeah, right. Now you're cooking on high heat in the middle of the street. Roller coaster, take me to a better time. Let's go. All sing your high line with the roller coaster of life. Yeah. It's time to all choose your timeline on the roller coaster of life.
And with that, good afternoon, good Sunday afternoon. Welcome to live stream number 3 weeks in a row. You know, I'm actually kind of digging the schedule, and this live stuff is getting a lot easier now that got the setup worked out. If anybody's in at this point, do me a favor and let me know if there's any lag with the audio or video. I actually did not do a lag test, but I do have my settings memorized and easy to get those going between my lives and my regular recording videos. So welcome everybody again. I think that we had a really good turnout those first couple, somewhere around 12 to 13 concurrent viewers for the first couple. We'll see if we can do that well again today. And again, as I say, if not, this is a good experience for me. So I'm not going to mess around a whole lot with introductions and things this afternoon. Let me just say a couple of things, and then I want to get right into this conversation. I'm actually really looking forward to breaking down what's going on over in Ireland and the UK and their ideology of masculinity and what they're doing to have those discussions in academia and in public policy type settings. But first, let me just mention that these Sunday live streams, what I think I want to do is I'm going to actually keep them up after the live for several hours, and then I'm going to move them over into members only videos. I'll talk about this a little bit more after we go through the topic of the day. Who might I see? Misty Eyed, if you're still here, thank you for very much for that for the comment, the little shout out. And so I'll talk about that several hours after the live. I'll leave it up for public for a while, and then I'm going to turn it into a members only. I'll talk about that here as we go, again, after the discussion. So let me get into this before too long. Drop comments for me as we go. I'll stop at a couple of places and kind of circle back where it kind of makes sense, where there are some natural breaks in this discussion. But here, let me share this. Let me just kind of jump right into here. I was actually looking through some research, as I like to do for some of my topics, several days ago, and I came across this article here, in which it's a quantitative study. It was an interview study that these authors, Fiona O'Rourke and Craig Haslop, did, in which they interviewed young men, I think between the ages, we can have a look here in a second, between the ages of 18, I think, and 25, and their use of chat rooms, for example, Discord, WhatsApp, and different platforms that were just their guys' kind of circles and spaces and conversations, and the types of topics that they talk about in there. I'm not going to go through this. In fact, this led me to what I really want to talk about today. It's by the same author, Fiona O'Rourke. I kind of followed her trail a little bit to see what else she had been doing. But this is the one that got me down a little bit of a rabbit hole. So I'm just going to scroll down here a little bit, and let's zoom in here just a little bit. And let me just check a couple of things here. All right. So this here's the sample of men, young men that they interviewed. I just kind of want to pay attention to their age. Oh, and they were all in Liverpool, Brighton, London, Glasgow. So I think all in the UK. And their ages between 19 and 25. You see a bunch of 18, 19-year-olds in here. So young men. And one of the things that really kind of struck me was one of the things that they found in the research study in these interviews was, oh my God, these guys are talking badly about women, right? They're talking about their sexual experiences. They did mention that these guys apparently were sharing girls' nudes, which my contention would be, why are 17, 18, 19-year-old girls sharing nudes with these men anyway? But one of the condemnations of these guys that they interviewed was that they were sharing nudes or showing girls' nudes, and that was pretty much about it. It was just boys being boys, to be honest. Now, obviously, I don't condone any of that. Don't go out and share any woman's pictures with your friends, obviously. But that was the crux of this study that kind of got me down into the rabbit hole. Let me scroll back up here just to the top. So that was this study here. If you want to go, if I haven't already put the links in the video description, I will be sure to do that. And let's take a look then at what I really wanted to go over today. And that is, let's see how we're doing on the framing over here. And that is this one here, masculinity influencers, addressing the impact of masculinity influencers on teenage boys. So this is the manual, we could call it, that Fiona O'Rourke, we'll have a look at these authors here in just a moment, and several colleagues had put together to inform schools and other people about how to handle online influencers in masculinity spaces. And again, we'll get into some details in those in just a little bit. But in schools and in the homes, oh my God, what can we do to have conversations with these boys and to stop all this misogyny that's going on? So this comes out of actually Dublin City University. So this is from Ireland. Most of the, I believe, authors and contributors and people who put this together were actually in England, in the UK. But it comes out of Dublin City University, and several of their contributors from Ireland as well. And well, just want to start off with this, that this cover image, right, is basically an academic resource that they're putting together, and they've got this basically, I don't know if this is supposed to be some type of a scare tactic or some kind of scary looking image here that, oh, we're coming for your boys. And let's have a look at the authors here. So my main purpose for putting this together and for going over it is just to kind of give everybody an idea of what it looks like on the academic side when we talk about, schools are coming after boys, and they are trying to redefine masculinity, and they're trying to reshape boys into be more, and we'll talk about this here in just a little bit too. I think it's very good evidence in this thing about how they're shaping boys to be more feminine and actually remove their masculinity from them. So that's kind of what I wanted to do, so that you can actually see what it looks like, because I don't know that a lot of people, really have a good understanding of where to find this information. It's out there if you just spend 20-30 minutes doing online searches, and you don't even have to go to necessarily to the organization or the school to find this information. But if you spend a little bit of time, you can find these types of documents that are being published and promoted. So here we look at the research team. This here again, so Dr. Fiona O'Rourke, this is the lead author on the initial paper that I showed you. So she and Dara McCaskin and Catherine Baker, the three main people on the research team. And what we see here is that 2 out of the 3 here are women, and the guy got his PhD, I think, in psychology just 5 years ago. So a young guy and 2 women are the lead research team for this for this resource. When we look at the Research Advisory Board, again, so these are substantial contributors here as well. We've got about 9 or so of them. 6 of the 9 are women. So we've got 6, 7, 8 out of 12 people who put this intervention together on what are we going to do about the masculinity problem. 9 of the 12, 8 or 9 of the 12 are women. So let's go ahead and dive in here. I made a whole bunch of highlights, but I'm not going to go through all of them, I don't think, and I'll just kind of get some of the main points. So some of these highlights are just for myself. But here we see in the, they open up by talking about online masculinity influencers and what those conversations look like, and strategies used by those influencers to engage boys and men, and we'll see it's all demonizing, as you can imagine. They talk about implications for educational interventions, and then they move on, guidance on addressing the impact of masculinity in influencers. And then, as we'll see, they actually go in and they lay it out step by step, and how to handle these issues and how to speak to boys, whether individually or in groups, I believe. So, can I zoom in here a little bit, make it a little bit easier for people as we go? All right, so in the introduction, they're just going to lay out some basic research, overarching kind of ideas, basically. And here what they're telling us is that these online influencers providing boys with information, and they say, albeit of varying degrees of accuracy. So you can see they're going to lean a lot on their, what they consider to be their prestige, their knowledge, and hey, the influencers that are giving this information, they're not always accurate, is basically what they're doing. So they're going to do a lot of tearing these people down here in the outset. However, teachers and parents and guardians in Ireland and elsewhere have become increasingly concerned about these masculinity influencers. I made several notes here throughout. This is, as I mentioned, an academic document, so we'll see several times, a lot of it actually being cited here. And I noted a bunch of these in which the authors are actually citing themselves. And if you've been around academics a little bit, or you may have even come across in different conversations and circles, one way for academics to get their work more widely distributed is to cite themselves and cite their friends in their different in the different work that they do, and then they just kind of like share that snowball, in which they're just many times citing their own work just to get the more notoriety. We'll see that several times as we go. I think many of them I highlighted in this purplish type color, so I'm not going to point all of them out. So they say that this resource aims to provide schools, teachers, and educators with the guidance on how to address all the impact of these online masculinity influencers, right? So this is actually a tool for teachers, educators, and others to actually provide them guidance in the step-by-step playbook. They say that their purpose is to provide introductory information, which we're looking at here, and then identify implications. All right, so what does all of the research mean? And then, as I mentioned, to present a practical guide that schools, teachers, and educators and others can use. And let's move into part 1 here. Okay, so some of these influencers, they say, promote harmful attitudes and behaviors. My question here is, who's determining whether it's the degree to which the behaviors and attitudes are harmful? Who gets to define that? Well, they spend a lot of time on this document talking about Andrew Tate. So we're going to see his name come up several times. In fact, I would say probably 90% of the references that they make about online influencers is about Andrew Tate. And they say explicitly harmful content that is misogynistic, homophobic, sexist, and full of conspiracy. Now, let me at the outset also say this. I'm not a huge fan of Andrew Tate. I don't watch his stuff. Obviously, I know who he is. I've seen his stuff in the past. I've seen headlines and things like that. I do believe that I probably have a lot of the same beliefs that Andrew does. He just goes with a much different approach than I would. He goes much harder than I would. But I think overall, he and I agree much more than we don't. So I don't have an issue necessarily with Andrew Tate's beliefs. My problem with Andrew is the way in which he approaches what he says and what he does. But I get it; it's helpful. And they do mention Pearl Davis here for just a moment. I think this might be the only reference about Pearl. They say Pearl Davis is another influencer who uses social media, listen to this, to spread men's rights and anti-woman messages. And here, my problem with this is, what is wrong with having conversations about men's rights, right? They don't spend a whole lot of time discussing, men's rights, things like that. Most of it is, that what people consider the toxic masculinity, and again, we'll see some of that. But why anybody would have an issue, academics, and think that they need to do something about whether it's Pearl Davis or anybody else having conversations about men's or fathers' rights is beyond me. So this is the kind of overreach that we're seeing in this type of in these types of articles. Again, I'll skip some of this, but you can see promotes rigid and oppressive views about what it means to be a successful man. Right, and then they go through here. They mention Andrew Tate. They have a problem with Tate saying that school is a waste of time. Listen, having spent as much time in college, university as I did, I would also say that yes, for many people, school, college, university is a waste of time, especially for the way that that society is these days. For men who want to make decent money and not waste 4 to 10 years in college or university, and they want to make a good income, college is a waste of time. You don't have to go to college to make multiple six-figure incomes, especially depending on your geographic area, what different industries are you're interested in and are in your area. So I agree, but they have a problem with Andrew Tate saying that school is a waste of time. They mention Myron Gaines, Mike Thurston here promote the idea that young men should manifest specific masculine ideas such as strength, toughness, and physicality through a muscular physique. And again, my issue here is what's wrong with that? What is wrong with teaching guys how to be tough? Now, I'm not saying be pricks or teach them how to be careless or heartless towards people. But yes, mentally, physically tough. What is wrong with that? But apparently these authors have an issue with it. They say ideas about masculinity that correlate with physical aggression. And we'll take a look. I think it's in this nice little pyramid that they put together to outline how easy it is to go from having certain beliefs to actually committing assault and things like that. So I thought this was funny too. I'm not going to click on these, but they actually embedded links of several of Andrew Tate's videos in here. Some of them I clicked on, and I thought it was hilarious because many of them are no longer up. They all go. I think they all go to YouTube. They're all YouTube links. Many of them do not even work anymore because the videos have been taken down, and several of them go to someone else's channel. This looks like somebody else re-uploaded Andrew's video. Because their channels with like 12 or 26 people, and the videos have gotten like 100 views, right? So why they decided to take that approach with their evidence here is beyond me, especially in this level of academic work. I keep checking my my settings over here just to make sure everything's still going smoothly. So if I look off camera for just a moment once in a while, that's why. Okay, so again, I will skip some of this. They move on to talk about disrespectful, discriminatory, and hateful language. And some of those terms, they include alpha male, such as socially and sexually dominant in his relationship with women. And when we talk about socially dominant, my argument here, my note was, this sounds exactly what women talk about when they're refer to themselves and others as being boss bitches, right? So apparently it's okay to say the world or the future is female, but it's not okay in that it's great to be a boss bitch and in control of your life and don't take shit from anybody. But when guys do it for the social dominance, apparently that's a problem. Other terms that they talk about here. Oh, this one I thought was great too. Beta male, right? So they describe beta male as a pejorative term that's used to insult a man, right? So they say beta is a bad word. Don't call people beta is basically what they're saying, because what that does is it describes people as guys as weak, passive, subservient, and sexually unsuccessful. And basically what they're saying is it's okay to be weak, passive, subservient. Beta is a pejorative term. Don't use that term because it's actually okay to be subservient and passive. And I have an issue with that. Similarly, simp, and then they describe sigma male here. They define it as less concerned with social norms. And my contention here, a note that I wrote, is that it seems that a lot of this is less about men being bad and more about validating women. Right? They want us to validate women, and so anyway, the way that they define or some of these words and terms that they have an issue with, it just seems a little bit ridiculous to me. But again, here, this, what they're doing is they're taking all of this, they're framing it from their very specific type of conversation that they want to lead into, so that when they get into the intervention, they've already got buy-in by people who are reading this. They talk a little bit about red pill, 304s, thoughts. This language playing is critical in creating culture. Scroll down here a little bit, and you can see this is just all about Andrew Tate all over. They move into the impact of online masculinity influencers, misogynistic content, negatively influencing how boys perceive and relate to girl students and women teachers, right? So they're saying basically we have to get rid of Andrew Tate and anyone else, Pearl Davis, who talks about men's rights and masculinity, because women and teachers have a problem with it. Andrew Tate, such as talking about men being better than women, right? What is wrong with Andrew Tate or anyone else for that matter? I don't want to make this all about him. It just happens to be their focus. But what is wrong with saying that men are better than women in anything when we hear it all day long? Women can do everything that men can do. Women are so much better parents. They're better at leading because they're in touch with their emotions, whatever the case might be, right? We hear it from the female side all the time, and for them to make such a point about it being a masculinity issue is just beyond me. Let's scroll down here a little bit. This is really messy in here. Here. If anybody's watching a little bit later, you want to take a pause on this. I don't even know what they're trying to say right here, other than this is how the individual is affected by different ecosystems, culture, society, things like that. But it looks really messy to me. I've seen much better presentations of things like this. Make sure my settings are all good still. All right. Here, so they cite research here in which 19% of children and young people who had seen Andrew Tate content thought that hurting someone physically is okay if you apologize after hurting them, compared to with only 14% would say that if they were not exposed or if they were not familiar with Andrew Tate. So the implication here is, for young men who know who Andrew Tate is, they are more likely to be aggressive, to be assertive, and to be to actually physically hurt someone is what they use, right? So they're citing other research here. What note did I put in here? I wrote that we would need to consider all of the dynamics behind this claim. Yeah, there's a lot of different context behind citing information like that. So they wrap this up with, how should we start considering why the content is popular and understanding how to develop effective interventions for this, which again they're going to lead into here in just a moment. So why are masculinity influencers popular among teenage boys? They have considerable policy, and I wish I wouldn't do that. So in my response here is that it resonates for most teenage boys. That's why it's popular. that's why guys, young men watch it, is because they're hearing messages that they believe are good for them. How to have confidence. I don't know if we got into it. Maybe I skipped past some of it already. If we didn't, we'll catch up to it here in just a little bit. But I do want to make this point. One of the issues that the authors has is that Andrew Tate and others, Myron Gaines, that they put emphasis on wealth, right? About expensive watches and cars and multi-million dollar homes. And I'm like, what is wrong with that? What is wrong with teaching guys the importance of being successful? Especially when we throw in the aspect of that's what women want from men. They want men with the money, right? Any of you that have been in the dating pool in the last 5 or I would even say last 8 years or so, you know what it's like to go in there broke. And you know what it's like to go in there and spend some money. Women want the money. They want the successful men. So again, this is just one of those things. Why they would have an issue with any male influencer in masculinity spaces, putting an emphasis on the importance of money, status, and owning expensive things. I don't know why that would be a problem. Okay, sorry, I do get off on a tangent, on a ramp tangent here once in a while. Why do some teenage boys and young men engage in online masculinity influencers like Andrew Tate? Again, kind of addressed a little bit of that already. This should also include offline messages that they receive from women, right? So here what they're saying is an individual's personal experience and their offline social environment. So these are also things that are influencing these young men, is their contention. And my response is, well, yeah, I mean, the same thing is happening with women, right? So, I'm not even going to get into a whole lot other than to just briefly mention, listen, the women's circles online in the TikToks, if these authors and academics think that it's any nicer or any different in the female circles online, then they're just, I don't know, they've been hiding under a rock. They're more likely obviously intentionally ignoring the way that women are treating men and the things that women are saying about men online. Again, we would never see an intervention like this, though, in the academic and political circles in which we need to train women to speak more highly about men and to treat them better. We would never see it. So challenges facing teenage boys and young men. Those of you who are watching, I'll go ahead and leave this here for just a moment, and you can pause and take a look. Again, I don't want to go through every one of these notes, but they talk a little bit about mental health. And this here, I highlighted green. Let me make sure that's visible on the screen. This is, I believe, maybe the only honest statement that these authors made in this entire 39-page document. So let me just read this, actually, what they wrote. Boys who are immersed in social environments at home, school, and local communities which stigmatize and pathologize men and masculinity may feel that their gendered identity is under attack, which may then lead to anger and resentment. And they cite something, an article there. This may in turn, the authors continue, this may in turn play a role in motivating them to seek online masculinity influencers who post content and that celebrates and idolizes men and masculinity as they find it inspiring. And this is the holy shit, duh, of course. This is, again, the only honest thing I think that they wrote in the entire article. That's exactly why young men are going and watching Gaines and Tate. And I don't know if you know how many young guys are watching she never goes by Hannah, but by Pearl Davis and others. I do know that the space in general is, there are a lot of young men consuming this content. What specific channels, I don't know. My content happens to be mostly, I think, 35 and older. Most of my viewers are, I would say, between 40 and 60 years old. So I get an older crowd. But again, yeah, no shit. This is exactly why guys are watching Andrew Tate and the others, is because in public, in schools and in communities and in their home, these boys are being stigmatized and pathologized. and they're being they're being spoken very very poorly of. So if they're not getting it in the schools already, if they're not getting edified and being treated well and spoken well of in schools and everything else, of course they're going to go somewhere else. But no, these people's intentions, what they would rather do is rather than do that, what we need to do is treat this like a problem. Like, boys, you have a problem. Stop thinking like that, rather than just giving them the respect that they deserve in the first place. Again, I hope that all of that makes sense. Some of this kind of gets wrapped up here within all of the different nuances of the context. So here they go, again, I'm not going to go into each one of these individually, but they talk about strategies that are used by masculinity influencers to engage men and boys. So, for example, an idealized version of masculinity. They want to bring change to idealized version, right? So basically what they're saying here is the idealized version of masculinity is wrong, and we need to change what that vision of masculinity means for these men, right? So we need to condition these guys, we need to brainwash them so that they have a different understanding of what masculinity is. Who said Pearl is a grifter? You know what, let me break here for just a moment, Ranger, and say I am not a huge fan of Pearl. I do catch her stuff once in a while. Here's one of the reasons I don't have a lot of respect for what Pearl does. Unlike the video that I did in which I kind of broke down the way Orion Taraban does his content, and his approach and his oration is so fluid, and he is so knowledgeable, and he's so great at bringing up topics, in that we don't. Anyway, I'm not even going to go into that. But with Pearl, I don't think Pearl is very intelligent, to be honest. Fun fact: I grew up about I don't know, just like 40 miles from where she lives in northern Illinois. But it was just actually a specific example with Pearl. Just this last week, she posted a video in which she was responding to a debate that she had previously had with some feminist woman. And the woman continued to ask Pearl, well, what's your source for that? Where's your source of information? What's the citation? Where did you get this information? How, what's your evidence? And Pearl had an issue with the woman continuing to ask her that question. And my response, as an academic, is, listen, Pearl or anyone else, if you're going to, and it was, I believe, it was some type of formal debate, right? It was planned, and they were going to debate each other. I didn't see the debate itself. But if you're going to go in and have a debate, especially in issues like this, in which, it's many people consider it toxic and taboo, you better have your facts straight, right? Like this academic type article right here that I'm going over. If I'm going to go debate somebody, I'm going to tell them that, yes, you know what? These people over in Ireland and in the UK at this university, they put together this intervention, and I'm going to cite it. And Pearl just had an absolute blowout because this woman was asking her for her sources. Anyway, that's just me in my perception of Pearl. I don't think she's very smart. There's nothing in her content that a 10-year-old couldn't do. It's just sitting down, reacting to videos, and saying that girls bad, boys good. That's all Pearl does. Ranger says I'm 34, so I'm at the crossroads of, sorry if I'm blasting in the mic here, at the crossroads of being young and having years. Yeah, 34, my mother, when I turned, I think when I turned 30, my mom said, this is when you start to understand life. And when I turned 40, she said, this is when life starts getting good. So Ranger, yeah, you're right. You are right in there. You get, I'm sure, great experience at this point, and by the time you're 50, you'll have it all figured out just like the rest of us. Unless you are a woman, you should not debate or talk about it. Marianne, I'm not sure exactly where you're going with that. Unless you're a woman, should not talk or debate it. I'm not sure. Sorry if you could clarify a little bit. Ranger says black pilled is just red pilled with maturity. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, Ranger, I don't know if you were here last week, but one of my comments, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, I wasn't sure exactly what black pill was. But after people defining it for me, I think that's where I am again, because my age, in my early 50s. I just don't want any contact with it at all. Again, a lot of that has to do with my age and having been married. My 3 daughters are all adults. My youngest one is graduating college at this point. I don't want anything to do with any of that ever again. So that's where the black pill comes in for me. If I were 30 years old at this point, I might still, be interested in having a relationship, maybe getting married, something like that. I don't know if I'd be black pilled if I were 20 years younger at this point. So let me continue down here a little bit. Anyway, okay, so where did we leave off? Strategies used by these influencers. Again, they say that these influencers are giving a version of masculinity, and we need to change what that version is. Other strategies by these male influencers. They are advocating for men. And what did I say here? Oh, so they're framing the advocacy for men that these that Tate and other people are doing. These authors are framing it as a tactic to suck in these young guys, and that the advocacy is the way that they do it. I'm like, well, no shit. So they say that these influencers appear to advocate for and empower men. And again, we get right back to what happens with women. Everywhere we turn, we have to have programs and schools and commercials and businesses that empower women. But when we have people online creating channels that are meant to advocate for men, which I always outright say that's why I feel like I'm here, is to advocate for men and to empower men. But apparently that's an issue for these authors. That's the way that us influencers and content creators suck in young boys and turn them toxic, basically, is what they're saying. Emotionally engaging issues. I'm going to skip past a little bit of this. By the way, as I mentioned, if I didn't already, I will put a link in the description so that you can actually download this. I downloaded this from, I think, their website. It was not difficult to find, but it is freely available online. I don't know if I put the description, the links in there yet. Do you do economics, finance, investment discussions? Ranger, I have not yet. I do take my finances seriously, and my budget, things like that, mostly because I did not start my profession, the career that I'm in now, I did not start until my early 40s. So I've only been actually in my profession for about 10 years. So I got a very late start on retirement. In fact, my retirement, really, I didn't start getting to it until about 5 years ago or so, 4 or 5 years ago. But it's things that have been on my mind. I just haven't been convinced yet that my channel is large enough, or that the types of viewers that I have right now would be into that type of content. But thank you for bringing that up. I would definitely do conversations about men in handling finances, investments, as you mentioned, different money matters. Partly because I like a lot of people, I imagine, I didn't learn a lot of that stuff from my parents, and I imagine that there's a lot of young guys out there that didn't have dads in their homes or anyone else to teach them these kinds of things. And if I could do the big brother, the uncle type conversations and help guys to understand some of those things because they hadn't gotten it at home when they were younger, I would totally be into it if there were enough interest, for sure. Let me scroll down here just a little bit. We're going to keep going. So implications. I'm going to skip past the implications. Again, the full article will be available in the link if anybody wants to dive into it closer. Understanding appeals. I want to move into, so that I don't take up too much time. Oh, here's the little infographic, the little chart that I had mentioned. I know that the words are blurry, even here in this document, so it might be a little bit difficult to read. But this is where I'd made a note. Of course, this requires a scare tactic which directly links their definition of discrimination or discriminatory beliefs, right, and how that leads to SA and homicide, right? So they put this very basic infographic type piece of visual guide and make the direct connection between, okay, this is why all of this is so important, because if these kids are learning discriminatory attitudes from guys like Andrew Tate, before you know it, they're going to be committing homicide. That's the very, very narrow bridge that they're building right here. So I just thought that that was hilarious. I thought it actually came almost out of nowhere. It's so out of place in a document like this. But again, it's the scare tactics that they're going for. Bring this back down here a little bit again. Okay, so here they're talking about core guiding principles, right? So that now we're getting into, okay, first they scare the hell out of everybody that's going to read this, right? And here's all the research on why Andrew Tate and Pearl Davis are bad. Now here's what we're going to do. Here's the solution, and here are actually the steps moving forward. So they invite critical thinking and reflection, focus on giving teenage boys critical thinking and reflection skills. And my immediate thought here is, how absolutely trashy is this? You are not inviting teenage boys to have critical thinking and reflection skills. You are telling them what to think. That's the opposite of asking these boys to be critical thinkers. You're telling them what to think. And I imagine, even somewhat along those lines, I don't think it's necessarily flip side, but also these guys are having critical thinking skills, right? They are getting messages or seeking messages outside of the norm, right? So this is just absolutely insane to me when they start bringing things like these up. Also, to develop teenage boys' knowledge, right? Another thing they want to do is empower teenage boys to recognize that they have agency. And they talk a little bit about social responsibility here. What was my note? Here's where the ideology and the mind shaping happen, right? When they start talking about social responsibility, right? And having conversations with guys about, hey, it's your responsibility to be a good person in society, and this is how we do it as good little boys. Right? So that's where a lot of the social indoctrination starts to come in. And let me move on. Okay, so again, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, so their intention is for this plan, this guide, to be used by guidance for schools, teachers, and educators. And my note here is this is where the systemic influence happens, in schools, by teachers, and educators. And I don't know if I made a note in here, but I do remember as I was kind of outlining this, thinking, and of course, because I don't know what the demographics are in Ireland and the UK. I imagine it's very similar to here in the United States, in which about 80% of our primary or our up to high school, 80% of our teachers are female, maybe 75%. And then when we get into universities and colleges, depending on what field you go into, 50% or more are going to be female. If it's something like psychology, which was my degree, it can be upwards of 60 or 70% female there as well. And not just the teachers, not just the instructors and professors, but the administrative staff as well. In younger schools, high school, primary school, things like that. A lot of those, in fact, I did a video just several weeks ago in which I believe 90% of the administrative staff and the superintendents, things like that, were women. So that's the types of environments in which this is all happening. Information for teachers. So again, they're just giving instruction for teachers in how to handle these conversations with guys. And they say here, avoid assumptions. And I just thought this was hilarious because, yeah, you can see that up there. And my note here was, you're asking now, after going through all of these, we're on now page 21 of 39. We're halfway through this document. You just gave all of this evidence, funneling teachers and educators' mind down this funnel that you've planned for them. And now you're telling these teachers and other people to avoid having assumptions. And my comment here was, that's got to be nearly impossible at this point, because these authors, they just wrote 20 pages of authority-driven content to solidify the information and the outcome that they want. And now you're telling people, okay, we're going to give you all that, but don't have any assumptions when you're talking to these kids, right? I just think the hypocrisy in a lot of this is just mesmerizing to me. They say also for teachers to engage in relevant training. And my response here is, who determines relevant training, right? So again, these authors, they could say, okay, well, make sure that you are providing, that you teachers, that you are getting relevant training so that you can have these conversations and address these issues. But who's going to determine whether it's relevant or not? Some of these other things. again, I'll just brief over some of this. They discuss time constraints. So this is actually the nuts and bolts and how to directly, what to do when you're having conversations with these young boys about masculinity, and even thinking about how the room is laid out, access requirements, and facilitating discussions. Let's see, before they meet face to face, right? So they're actually literally going play by play. And when I put Playbook in the title of this video, this is basically why, is because as I mentioned, they're outlining every little itty bitty step on how to approach these kids. Discussion framework. Again, I'm going to go through some of this a little bit quick. Some of it would be repetitive if I spent too much time on it. Creating a group agreement, and I thought this was hilarious, right? Especially being a psychologist, would they recommend creating a group agreement with participants to co-create a group agreement? And my comment here was, this is simply groupthink, right? So in smaller groups, whether it's multiple teachers, for example, getting together and discussing how they're going to approach these kids, or whether it's one instructor having conversation with a small group of these young men to come to groupthink, basically. Let's get consensus. And then, because when we do that, that's a way to control. If we have a group of, let's say, 5 people, whether it's a group of teachers, right, that we're trying to develop into these mediators and have these conversations, or if it's a small group of, say, 4 or 5 young boys, young men, if we can get pretty much everybody into consensus, then the one who does not agree is going to be far less likely to raise his hand and say, you know what, I'm not quite so sure that I agree with that, right? So that's why it's important for them to get that groupthink in these conversations that they're putting together. I'm just reading. Mariana sounds like a bot. Or, yeah, I don't know. If you want to respond again, I don't know, Mariana. I don't know what you were referring to. So let me scroll past some of this. And here's, again, I won't go into each of these. Maybe I'll point out one or two. But tips for talking to teenage boys about masculinity. And this, again, is the direct playbook about, this is the conversation, that these are the topics that you bring up when you talk to these kids. And here they're saying things like, take a positive affirmative approach. And my note here was, yeah. And so what they're going to do is they're going to start these conversations when they sit down with one of these young boys, one of these teenagers, however old these kids are. Start out with affirming them. And my comment here is, yeah, what they're going to do is they're going to start out with a validation to earn these kids' trust. And then they're going to turn the conversation, and we'll see how they do that here in just a moment, right? So we're going to start the conversation agreeing with these kids. We're going to affirm. And then we're going to use that to gain their trust as we move forward. And they move from that on to affirming positive gendered traits, right? So now we're not just affirming the boy, now we're affirming gender. And then we're going to promote equitable gender relations. See how the order of this conversation is going? And when I talk about, brainwashing, this is actually how it happens. It doesn't happen in a matter of 30 minutes, but over time, you give a school system or a community enough time, and they continue this, even if it's not one-on-one with young men, give them enough time. This is exactly the playbook for getting it done. And then they also mention here to remain patient and supportive, right? So again, continue to reassure these boys that we're on their side. They just need to start thinking like us a little bit more. My comment here was, again, reinforcement to validate, taking it full circle, right? So we start with the validation, and then we tell boys, how important it is, to have be conscious of gender and gender relationships and being equitable and everything. And then we come full circle with more support and affirmation of these boys. Key discussion themes. Some influencers argue that real men must be, here's what I think I mentioned earlier. Some influencers argue that real men, and they put real men in quotes, must be strong and not show emotion or vulnerability. So these are questions to ask boys when these teachers and others are having conversations with them. right? So ask these boys why they think it's important to not show emotion or vulnerability. And my response is, until people start to allow men to be vulnerable and not get their emotional and financial asses handed to them, then maybe they should start being vulnerable. I may be right, I may not be right. I am not a therapist, I am not a clinician, so please do not take my advice. But I do not have an issue with men withholding vulnerability in today's society, because when they are vulnerable, they absolutely get their asses handed to them by women individually and by society at large. Ranger, I'll check a comment here in just a moment. I really do appreciate you being engaged, so thank you very much. Thanks for adding to the discussion. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but more questions for these teachers and others to be asking of these young men. What are the consequences? What consequences do you think come from views of masculinity? Right. So now what they're doing is they're saying, hey, this has consequences. Why don't you tell me what they are? Right. So now they're getting these guys to verbally, out loud, say things that are not helpful based on their perceived masculinity. Right. They're saying it out loud. Right. Again, that's a tactic. It's one thing if a guy thinks something, or anybody in general, just as a psychologist, but when we actually get them to verbalize it in public, in the presence of other people, that's very, very validating in a way, again, to get them to actually change their own beliefs, because they're thinking, well, I just said that out loud. I must actually believe it, right? So you can see how these direct questions and these leading these conversations with these kids, they're going to get exactly the result that they want. They are not educating these boys, they are conditioning them. Another question, do you think someone else's mental health could suffer, right? So now they're saying, basically what they're saying is, if you continue this, young boy, in doing what you're doing, it's going to affect the mental health of other people. Other people are going to suffer because this is because of your beliefs, is basically what they're saying. All right, I spent quite a bit of time on this. I don't think I have a whole lot left to go over, so let me just kind of skip past masculinity and what it means to be a successful man. Yeah, this is where I had mentioned, okay, why do they have an issue with men wanting to be successful, physically tough, dominant, making a lot of money? Why is that a problem? And they put successful, right? When we talk about, money and things like that, they put success in quotes. And I don't know that we've come across it. I don't think we've seen it. If we don't come to this specific example, I just want to make a point that there are... Let me see if it's one of these. There's a couple of times in here in which it's very, very obvious that not only do they have an issue with these boys' masculinity, they actually want them to have more feminine traits. And again, we may have already skipped past it, but it's very, very obvious that they want these boys to be more feminized. I mean, it's almost, they didn't say it in exactly those words, but they may as well have a couple of times in this document. So again, this just goes on to give specific examples, and it's basically a script for them to have conversations with these kids. What impact do you think gender roles have with people, for example? And then they put a picture in here. Yeah, look at, see, this is just a reinforcing photo about, hey, look at these guys in the circle. They're all smiling. They're all having these conversations and accepting our version of what masculinity should be for them. And look at them. They're all happy. Anyway, I just thought that photo was a great example of the visuals in this thing. Potential challenges, right? So now they're preparing these teachers and others who are going to have conversations with boys. They're preparing them for, hey, these are some challenges that you might have. These are some issues that you might have to address when you're going through this process and having these conversations. Oh, and a lot of shame and conformity. I noted in here in group settings, right? You get young impressionable boys in group settings, and they are very impressionable and very willing, or much more likely to conform in those group settings. For example, friendly reminders to the whole group to respect the group agreement, right? So first we got to get a group agreement, and then we have to remind them to be respectful of that group agreement. You see how all this plays out? It's just amazing. Okay, let me start to wrap it up there. A couple more comments. On the one hand, I can understand the need for this kind of discussion. But on the other, schools are absolutely lost. We can't save them. We're reverting back to more primitive times quickly. Yeah, whether these conversations need to be had in school, I don't know. And two things come to mind. One is none of this was happening back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. I graduated high school in 1991, and none of this was happening then. We all survived. We're just fine. Why this has to be an issue in the last 10 or 15 years, I don't know, other than it's more readily available, right? As they mentioned, 40 years ago, Andrew Tate would have not had any influence on society at all. The only reason that it's an issue now is because it's so much more widely available and it's on demand. And the other thing is, even if it were necessary for us to have these types of conversations and programs and trainings, interventions, let's be honest, I think they refer to this as an intervention. It is an intervention. Even if it were necessary, if I could be convinced that it would be absolutely necessary that these are required to do, I would only support it if we did the same thing for women and girls, and we gave them the same type of intervention. Again, as I mentioned earlier, to speak more highly and to treat men better in relationships and just in society in general. So, if I were to say that yes, this is important and we need to do this, that's the only condition under which I would actually support it. I think. I'm all for staying and chatting about other things, even saying pass on the talk, but if it's just about that. Yeah, come on back for a different live, Ranger. I'm doing these every Sunday. I am going to, as I mentioned, I'm going to take my lives after several hours of them being public, and I'm going to put them into the members only. I'll discuss that in here just a moment. But thank you for being here. I hope that you're already subbed. I think this is the first time I've seen you in a live in the chat. So thank you very much for being here. Hope to see you again. Anybody else still hanging out around? Give me a shout out. Let me know what questions you have, specifically about this. Let me actually bring this up. About this intervention that I've been going over. Again, I've got several other highlights in here that I'm just going to skip over. I don't want to put my highlighted, or this copy, this PDF that I put my notes into, I don't want to post that for anybody for legal reasons. It's not my document to give, but as I mentioned, if it's not already, there will be a link in the video description where you can actually just go download this yourself directly from these authors' sites. So that's what I've got for you, fellas. I knew that this one was going to take a little bit longer. We've been talking about this for about 55 minutes at this point. But I did want to break it down and go through, for those of you who have not done a lot of academic reading and seen things like this, and how it's actually put together, how the content builds on it, and then how it's actually delivered into social systems and academic systems and in political arenas, saying, okay, now we put all of this together, let's go institute this intervention in our schools now, in our community centers. This is actually what it looks like. And by the way, I think that it was just like less than 2 years ago, I think they finished this. Maybe like a year and a half ago. I can't remember. So this is brand new. The level to which they have rolled this out and the types of meetings that they're having and the implementation, I don't know. Maybe I'll do a follow-up on that at some point. So yeah, I don't know the degree to which they've actually rolled a lot of this out. It is brand new, and it's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this one as well, because let me just put this up here again, just as a the home page here. Oop, there we go. There we go. Okay, so that's what we've got. Again, I knew this would go a little bit longer because I did want to go through and discuss a lot of the information in it. So let me just a couple of kind of behind the scenes channel type things. I've got some thoughts, and I think I'm going to do not really experimenting. I don't know the word to use with format and direction of this channel, and prioritizing a lot of the effort and the thoughts in the work that goes into a lot of this content. So, as I mentioned, what I'm going to do is moving forward. I think I'm gonna continue doing the Sunday lives. I really like doing it. Small channel at this point, so it's not a lot big crowds, not a lot of chatting, things like that going on, which is totally fine. I just like being here for all of you. But I'm going to take these Sunday lives. I'll leave them up through Sunday for several hours, and then I'm going to move them into the members, the membership videos for members only. And one of the reasons for that is I really, as I continue to talk about some of the behind the scenes things and the channel development and things like that, I want those to be more for guys that are looking for the more in-depth content, the behind the scenes type of thing, and actually, consideration that I will take as far as the channel direction, right? So guys that are making that type of an investment, I want to make this available for those guys. So again, this will be up for several hours after the live, and then the others from the last couple of weeks, I've already put those into a members only. If you're not familiar how to get there, I don't know if it's in every video page, but if you go to my channel, you should find a join button somewhere in there. There's two levels. One is, I think, just $1.99, just a small cup of coffee a month, and the other is $4.99. So just a couple of dollars to help support the channel. It's not going to pay my mortgage, anything like that, but every little bit does help and just kind of supports and gives me the reassurance, that we're on the right track for the channel and getting good content out there, the best content that I can. Also, well, anybody that's watching, and anytime we do these lives, feel free. It's a great time to, for us to have a personal conversation. Let me know any topic ideas that you might want to see. Ranger earlier, asked about finance and things like that, economics. I would be more than happy to have conversations about those within, men's areas and a frame of masculinity and things like that. I'm not entirely convinced that my channel is large enough or that that's what guys are coming to my channel for. But if it's needed, absolutely I would. I take that stuff very, very seriously. I've actually got a lot of materials already that I could do some of that content. But different research angles, any patterns that anyone's seeing, any news stories that anyone's interested, anything that I can do to make content more relevant, more timely, please do let me know. And one other thing, I want to leave you with this. I don't know who's going to be watching this thing after a full hour. Maybe I should have just dropped a little bit of this at the beginning as a teaser. But I think before too long, I don't know exactly when, I want to start a small selective pilot program. And if anyone is interested, you can go to my site, rowpress.com. I think it's /pilot. They're up in the top menu navigation bar. I think there's a little link for pilot. I think what I want to do is pilot some work for my rules of engagement. Just a small group of guys, and you can find some information on that link at rowpress.com. Go there, and if it makes sense to run it, I would really like to do that. Again, just start out as a pilot. Don't want to explain a whole lot at this point, but if anyone is interested in having occasional meetings and go through some of the content, it would actually be, working on, life improvement, things like that. So if anyone would be interested in something like that, it's something that I eventually want to do at some point, and I made the commitment in 2026 to actually start making some progress on rolling that out and actually offering things to meet personally with guys and to help them be the best that they can be. So, I don't know why I keep forgetting to move just the headshot here. So yeah, if you're anyone that's interested in that, go to rowpress, ROEPRESS.com, and there's just a little bit of information on there. Right now, I just asked you to just send me your email, and that's all. Just if I decide to move forward with it, I would just respond to people and say, hey, are you still interested in doing this? This is kind of like what we're going to be doing. So absolutely no obligation right now. It's just a list of guys who might be interested in something like that if I were to do it. So Listen, thanks for everybody. I see we've still got several here. So everybody, thanks for stopping by. Ranger did most of the chatting here, which I do appreciate. Any guys, that were here and just did not feel like chatting, maybe it's the first time here, I totally get it. If you're a regular and you're just quiet, I can appreciate that as well. But yeah, unless we have any other conversations, anything else to address from the chats, I'm going to leave it at that. I'll give just a moment, but do leave me comments. If this is your first time seeing something like this intervention that's happening in academia, let me know. If there are others maybe that I could review, I'd be happy to do that as well. Again, just even for my own information, my own knowledge. Which part did you think was most interesting throughout this manual that they put together? It was how they're framing masculinity, how they actually approach and put together the step-by-step conversations that they recommend having with these young boys. Very curious to see what people had seen, what types of examples other people were familiar with, specifically in this area, and what was most interesting to them. So listen, again, everybody, go have a great rest of your weekend. Thank you for being here. Those of you over in Ireland and in the UK, I feel for you, man. We know that the stuff is going on in the United States. But we're not always aware of the extent of what's happening overseas as well. But as we can see, it's the same shit over there as it is here. So anyway, stay strong, fellas, and yep, I will see you live again.